So when a person is in a divorce or in any form of negotiation with a covert narcissist, then what?
Well, it's the same
kind
kind
of
of thing.
thing.
You're going to have the same sort of thing. I mean, they're going to probably obstruct you. They're, they're not going to give over information. They're going to put up roadblocks at every chance that they can. They're going to manipulate everything that you say, but they're just going to do it in a way that's more under the radar and harder for you to bring to people's attention, because when you bring what they're doing to people's attention, it's the kind of thing where people go, well, that's not that bad. Or that was probably just a mistake.
Yes, exactly. Gaslighting.
Yes, exactly. So, whereas an overt narcissist or the grandiose narcissist,
you can see it.
It's much more manipulative. You can actually see it right in the email chain. It's easier to follow the email chain and go, well, okay, here you go.
Would you argue maybe it's a different form of manipulation? Because I think passive aggressiveness is at its core manipulation, right?
100%.
It's the attempt of, maybe it's not even an active attempt, but it is the induction of negative emotion in another person, typically guilt, to mobilize action on their part, not because the other person wants to do something, but they're doing it to stave off this sense of guilt.
And it's absolutely just as traumatic for the victim.
Yes. Yeah,
100%.
manipulation's manipulation. I mean, I don't care if it's in your face, I don't care it's through a passive-aggressive back door, it definitely leaves people sort of reeling. So this takes us then to one last form of narcissism I want to get to, because I think it's worth mentioning because it's more dangerous, which is malignant narcissism. There are researchers out there that view malignant narcissism as sort of like that space in the middle where more of a grandiose narcissistic style meets like a low-grade psychopathy, meets this sort of really Machiavellian, manipulative, political, very skilled, working other people's style. Malignant narcissists are where we're going to see your CEO types, we're going to see your world leader types, we're going to see people at the top who are able to charm you, then go chew someone else out, then go destroy someone else's life, and then go charm someone else. Like their ability to just sort of do that leaves everyone confused, and they've usually charmed the right people, including people like judges. They're that good. Whereas the covert narcissist ain't charming anyone. Even the grandiose narcissist gets a little bit nervous during a divorce. A malignant narcissist is very cool under stress.
Yeah, it's harder to get them unglued.
Yes, it is. It is, and they can be dangerous. I mean, we have been talking about negotiating a divorce thus far from a perspective of not from a violence perspective. Now remember, abuse in a relationship can take many forms. The majority of clients I work with are dealing with severe psychological abuse, which to me is every bit, perhaps even more traumatic than physical abuse. And it also
100%.
includes things like stalking, coercive control, financial abuse.
No boundaries.
Yeah, so all that thing, the financial, the control, all of it, it's a disease that overtakes the person, and they realize they're literally living in a prison when they're in a relationship with a malignant narcissist. It can escalate to danger, and in the cases I've consulted on where a person's divorcing a malignant narcissist, we have to come up with a safety plan, and that's where I've worked with people who have expertise in domestic violence on having a go bag, and how do you set that up, and how do you, we're teaching people to clear out the search histories on computers and stuff. I mean, in the electronic age, in some ways,
also save the things that they need to save.
Save what you need to save. Clear out what you don't want to do. Go to libraries,
Change
use
your
other
passwords.
computers,
I
change
tell
your
people
passwords.
that all the time.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, this is a different territory. Is there any other thoughts when you're negotiating with someone who, if not full on dangerous, like going to really do physical harm to you, is always menacing? They send that menacing email. There's something almost stalky about them. It doesn't relent. Emails at 3 in the morning. I mean, these are the clients I work with who are the most wrecked. I mean, they are in a post-traumatic stress state almost all of the time.
Yeah. And they have no boundaries. So, I mean, they'll just show up at your house. They'll do whatever they need to do, whatever they want to do. So, first of all, let me just say, and I tell my clients this all the time, if you feel that you are in danger, please call the police. Don't call your lawyer. Your lawyer can't do anything right away. So, a lot of times I hear people saying, how is he or she getting away with this? And it's a very common thing. And so let me just inject reality into that statement really briefly. And that is that there are no divorce fairies that linger around people's houses and come jumping out of the wall when somebody misbehaves.
Exactly right.
So how are they getting away with this? remember, the only person that has any power over anyone else in our society is the judge. That is it. There's law enforcement if you break the law. If you do something criminal, you can call the police. Other than that, it's the judge. Those are the only avenues of getting someone to behave. That's it. So when you're dealing with somebody who is menacing and maybe unsafe or stalking, then you have to call the police. Because most states, in order to get any kind of an injunction, so if you want to get some kind of injunction against the person, or I guess in regular word terms, it's a restraining order or something like that, you have to be able to show that you're in danger. You have to be able to show, you can't just say, I'm scared of this person, because this person has civil rights, they have constitutional rights, they have to have notice and opportunity to be heard and all of that sort of thing. And so call the police if you think that you're in danger. It will only help you get that restraining order down the road if you decide that that's what you want. The worst possible thing that you can do is go try to get a restraining order and then it doesn't stick, because now the person feels empowered. So you have to be really, really careful about making sure that if you're going to go that route, that it's going to stick and you're going to get it.
But also, let's warn people that once you get a restraining order, the likelihood of violence skyrockets.
Well, because they're
yes, but that's the reality check. I don't want people to think restraining orders are an answer. I think they're a step, but they're a step that put people in danger, and that's the nature of how our system works. So I think to say that I mean, the number of people, at least the number
I have a lot of people ask about them. So the only other path is some kind of a civil order, which would be, exclusive occupancy of your house or something like that. And, those things you can get, but they take time.
Yes, they do.
So you have to, what the lawyer's power is to file a motion, set the motion for hearing in front of the judge. Then, and all the judges are very backed up. The judicial system is extremely backlogged. And so it takes a while to get a hearing.
Yes, it does.
And then once you get that hearing, newsflash, the judges don't always rule right away, which is really frustrating too. And so sometimes you're waiting weeks, months. I've even waited months for an order from that judge. So how is he or she getting away with this? Well, the only way you can rein in the behavior is by creating enough leverage in order to get that person to come to a table and potentially have a resolution with you, or get enough leverage that you can convince the judge to order things to go your way.
Right, which is hard. And again, in the populations I deal with, I deal with the people where things didn't go their way. And too many women who are beaten up or killed because the restraining order came that inflamed the violence. It's a nice idea, and law enforcement has more leverage. So it really opens up this whole issue of these are complicated issues. And in the bottom line, and I think one of the most painful things I've heard is the number of clients who've worked with me who've said, this person is a bad person. They should not be raising these kids. And again, it's usually not even the money piece. And they'll still be upset. I don't know how you expect me to do all this with this little bit of money. But how can you let this person half the time raise children? And I'm telling you, as somebody who's worked with these families, I have seen the majority of narcissists I've worked with got 50% custody.
Yeah, because
50% custody.
Yeah.
And let me tell you this, there's no happy ending to this. Children are destroyed.
Well, here's what happens a lot of times in the negotiation for that, and especially in states where child support is tied to time sharing.
Yes.
Which a lot of states it is. Some states it's not, but most states it is. Yeah. And so what they do, especially if they're the moneyed spouse, is they go for time sharing because then they pay less in child support.
That's right.
And a lot of times they end up not taking it, which means that the non-moneyed spouse isn't getting the full amount of support.
And still with the kids.
They have the kids all the time.
Right. Which, again, I understand what you're saying, that this is a right of the child, but I always advise clients, I say, anytime they try to blow you off and blow off the kids. Like they got the kids 50% of the time, so they didn't have to give you the money. That's why they fought for it. They didn't want the kids, they wanted the money, okay?
But
now,
it's also, though, the facade of I got my kids 50% of the time. Because they don't want to tell the world that they didn't want their kids.
Right, they don't want to tell the world, but they don't want their kids.
No, but they want the show that they got 50%.
Right, so after the show is proven and they can walk around saying they want 50%, they're always trying to foist the kids on the other partner, 100%. To which I tell the other partner, who's usually the one I'm working with, take them. They're like, but this is unjust. I'm like, this whole thing is unjust. Didn't you say you want to be with your kids 100% of the time? Anytime they give them, take them, because the less time those kids are spending with the narcissistic parent, probably the healthier for your kids. Now, what does end up happening is that they're not often getting the requisite additional money that more time would take. They figure it out. But I'd say if you can get the time with your kids, get the time with your kids.
Okay, so a little strategy here as far as during a divorce. If the divorce is taking several months, which a lot of them do, then give the narcissist 50% of the time during the temporary period, because you will give them rope to hang themselves that way. Because then by the time you get to that final hearing or you get to the mediation, you've now kept a log, which I tell everybody, keep a log.
Oh, so do I. Yes,
so you've now kept a log that shows that this person showed up late, didn't take them, asked you to take them, blah, 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 because they can't help being themselves. They're not going to take the kids 50% of the time, even during that 9-month or 1-year period. You will have lots and lots of times that they asked to change the schedule, they showed up late, blah, blah, blah. And so now you have that leverage. Now you have the information that you need in order to push for the custody arrangement that you want.
Okay, it's a great point. I mean, again, we probably talk for 17 hours on this because we've seen it from both sides of it, and it is interesting, like, you know, to watch that. I say exactly that is you have to keep the most detailed log. I said it's almost like you're keeping records and charts the way a physician would, like you know, days, hours, you
I've
name
won
it.
entire cases on those.
Yes, I'm sure that's good, and I hope you heard that. She's won entire cases on those. You can't do this after the fact. You have to do this in real time. You're not going to be able to even construct it a week later. In real time, it has to become a daily practice that you're logging this stuff. It's difficult, it's painful, it's uncomfortable. You must do it. It's part of your healing, but it's also part of your strategy.
Just open a notes thing in your calendar or your phone, or use an app. There are apps just for taking notes for that. I mean, so just get into the habit of logging it real time.
So let's talk about narcissists and their 7 deadly sins. One of the things that you should know is that narcissism is a legit personality disorder, and it causes people to have no sense of inner value, 0 sense of inner value. They have to get all of their value from the external, and it causes them to have a complete lack of empathy or care for anyone else. There's just something that's broken inside of them that they just can't. They can't feel a capacity of care for the other person. So understand that there are 3 different types of narcissists in general, which are the covert narcissist, which I call the wolf in sheep's clothing. That's the one that I was actually a victim of 2 of them, not husbands, but people in my life. And so I have my own serious disdain for covert narcissists. But these are the people that look really nice. They appear to be wonderful, kind, good people. Oftentimes they're psychologists or lawyers or doctors or clergy or people who have a lot of respect in the community. So that's covert narcissist. The second type of narcissist is your grandiose or overt narcissist, is sometimes what they're called. And that's more of what I call the garden variety narcissist, the one that you normally think of when you think of narcissists. That's the kind that goes around telling everybody how great they are all the time. And the funny thing for me is that when I discovered that the 2 people that I was dealing with were covert narcissists, when it was brought up to me that that's what they were, I thought, oh no, I don't think they're narcissists. I think they might be insecure. But that's because they're covert. The overt or grandiose narcissist goes around telling everybody how great they are. They're very boastful, braggadocious. They really stand out as narcissists, and people will often say, oh, they're narcissists, which to me those people are actually less insidious than the coverts because you can see them coming a mile away. The third type of narcissist is what we call the malignant narcissist. And this is a type that can tend to be pretty dangerous and really pretty evil. This is the kind that might tend to engage in stalking or violence or threats of violence or something like that, or they have no problem, calling the police and falsely accusing people of horrible things like child molestation when they know for sure that that's a complete lie. That's just so evil and awful. And that's a malignant narcissist. And you can have different types of narcissists that are in combination as well. Like you can have a malignant covert narcissist, that sort of thing. So those are the 3 types. So now let's talk about the 7 deadly sins. So the first deadly sin is shamelessness. Narcissists are openly and proudly shameless, especially the grandiose and the malignant type. They're not bound by the emotional needs of others, so they're just shameless in the kinds of things that they go after. And actually, let me amend that and just say I've seen covert narcissists be shameless in the kinds of things that they think that they're entitled to as well, and that they'll go right after. They loathe criticism. They consider criticism to be toxic, and any hint, smell, whistle, tone of criticism, they will take very, very personally because it implies that they're not perfect and need to change. Number 2 is magical thinking. Narcissists want to project that they are perfect, and so they distort everything through that lens. And so part of this magical thinking piece is they project their faults and flaws through others. This is part of the whole gaslighting thing. So if you say, hey, you dropped the ball on that deadline to a coworker or an employee, then they're always going to have some excuse as to why it was somebody else's fault. Number 3 is arrogance. They are extremely arrogant, and oftentimes they have to feel like they need to inflate their ego by deflating others. So this is where you will see them deflating, devaluing, degrading, cutting down others, because they need to feel like they are superior to everyone else. Number 4 is envy. Oh my goodness. Narcissists are so envious of everyone else, and they're envious in every possible way. Life is just not fair for the narcissist. So if someone else has more money than they do, has a better position than they do, got something that they didn't, got attention that they didn't receive, even if it has nothing to do with them, absolutely nothing to do with them at all, and most of the time it doesn't, they are extremely jealous of other people. So this is where you'll find them, maybe devaluing somebody else's contribution, or not valuing it at all, or poo-pooing it, or saying that it really didn't matter, or it didn't actually contribute to anything. They're contemptuous and minimize other people's accomplishments. And they're so jealous of them that they just constantly want to bring them down. Number 5 is entitlement. Narcissists hold an unreasonable expectation of special treatment. They think that they should get the best parking spaces or the best places in the restaurant, or they shouldn't have to wait for anything. They think, that everyone should see them as entitled and special. And if you don't fall in line with that, then you're going to be subject to their ire. Failure to comply with this entitlement piece is considered to be an attack, because with a narcissist, you're either for them or you're against them. You can't just be neutral. You can't just walk away from each other like two normal people, or just decide you don't want to work together anymore, or you just, don't want to be in a relationship anymore. You can't just wish each other well and move forward. No. Can't work that way. You're either for them or it's an attack on them. And defiance of their will is something that inflames their narcissistic injury, which will trigger their narcissistic rage. If you have seen any of these deadly sins so far, give me a I've seen it in the comments. Number 6 is exploitation. And what this means is that narcissists will use people for whatever they need to use them for. They exploit others. So the thing about narcissists that you have to remember is that you really have no value to a narcissist other than what you can bring to them. Narcissists need an endless amount of what we call supply. And supply can be negative or it could be positive. And what I mean by that, because really no supply is good in a sense, but what I mean by that is that narcissistic supply is anything that feeds their ego. So it could be, having the biggest house, the biggest job, the biggest bank account, the best friends, the most in the highest places, the most recognition, things like that. But narcissistic supply can also come in the form of treating people badly, degrading, debasing, cutting people down, some of the other deadly sins that we just talked about. So once you decide you don't want to be in a relationship with a narcissist anymore, then you no longer have any value to them. And as I said before, you're either for them or you're against them because they're exploiting you, they're using you. So this can take many different forms, but exploiting others always involves using others without any regard for their feelings or interests. And number 7, drumroll please, number 7 is no boundaries. Narcissists have no boundaries. That's part of being a narcissist. And the interesting thing, I always think about boundaries because I've had to deal with this with the covert narcissists that were in my life, is that you're supposed to respect their boundaries. They don't have to respect yours. That's how that goes. And so, they'll show up at your work, they'll show up at your office, they'll break into your computer, they'll read your email, they'll read your mail, whatever they feel entitled to do. That's part of the entitlement as well. And this is where, if you're talking about a malignant narcissist, you might see stalking. Okay, so let's talk about how to look confident as hell in any situation. And by the way, why would you not want to be confident in any situation? Because showing up as being confident gets you absolutely everywhere. And I'll tell you something, my dad, who was actually Chinese, and he came over here when he was 15 years old from China. He worked his way up. They had nothing. He actually ended up going to Columbia Medical School. He became a doctor. And he used to say, whatever you say it with authority and people will believe you. And I now have listened to Tony Robbins and people like that. And Tony has said, like, whoever speaks more confidently, that's the person who gets what they want in a conversation. So true. You have to say things with authority. You have to show up as confident. And, I've now seen motivational speakers talk about how confidence is a habit, which is definitely true. I talk about how I never leave my thoughts unsupervised because you have to constantly be working on being that confident version of yourself because it's not always easy. People are always there to try to knock you off your game, including yourself. I say that negotiation is something that you're always working on. And sometimes the first negotiation that you're doing is with your own self-worth. So almost all of it is right here. But the person who shows up the most confident in a negotiation is often the one who gets what they want. And people will think what you tell them to think. So it is really, really important for you to show up as the most confident version of yourself. 99% of winning a negotiation is your mindset and how you show up. So this is almost one of the most important videos to watch when it comes to winning a negotiation. Okay, so number 5 is clothing choice. And clothing choice, I love because there's all kinds of psychology around wearing things that make you feel powerful, wearing things that make you feel like $1 million. You know how you feel when you put on that power suit or that power dress, whatever it is that makes you feel like, really good, that makes you feel beautiful, that makes you feel amazing, whatever it is that makes you feel like the Adonis or that power suit, right? For the guys. So wear something that makes you show up feeling powerful. Okay, that's number 5. Number 4 is color choice. Many, months ago when I first started doing YouTube, I actually did a whole video on clothing color and psychology. Super old, but you can definitely go take that video out if you'd like. But, there's actually a whole psychology around what color to wear. So color choice is something that you can figure out as well. But, red can sometimes mean danger. Black is definitely powerful, but blue is a color of trust. Green is a color of trust. Those are good colors. Yellow can sometimes mean weakness. White usually means like a good thing sometimes too, so you can definitely figure out what colors to wear as well. Number 3, power poses. Reading other people's body language, looking at your own body language, but power poses, being open, having your arm draped out across the chair. Sometimes this can be a good power pose. Sometimes it can look like you're closed, but sometimes it could be a good power pose. Steepling can look powerful. So I have a whole video on reading narcissist body language, by the way, which you can definitely check that out as well. Number 2, word choices. Be very careful about the choice of words that you use. Don't say, I'm sorry, or you don't have to, or, that's weak ass language. Get that out of your languaging. I'm okay if you don't, or I'm sorry, or be very, very careful about using weak ass language. You got to think to yourself, I'm unstoppable. I remember hearing Tony Robbins, I think it was, talk about how when he was first starting and really like pumping himself up, he used to go running and he would like the whole entire time that he was running, he'd like say to himself, I'm fucking unstoppable. I'm fucking unstoppable the whole entire time. And by the time he was done running, he would like just that was like burned in his brain. So I want you guys to write in the comments right now, I'm unstoppable. I want you to just start thinking that and start burning that in your brain right now. I'm unstoppable. Okay. That's your mantra for today. I'm unstoppable. All right. So that's number 2. And number 1, what do you think number 1 is? What do you think I think number 1 is? I kind of gave you a clue at the beginning of this video. Number 1 is definitely your mindset. I know, I fight with it too sometimes. We all do. That's why I never leave my thoughts unsupervised, because you have to, remember that your input equals your output. So what does that mean for me? What does that mean for you? It means when I'm by myself, when I'm driving in my car, when I'm brushing my teeth, getting ready in the morning, when I'm making dinner, walking my dog, whatever, I'm listening to something that's going to be good for my input so that my output is good. I'm listening to an audiobook. I'm listening to a YouTube video. I'm listening to whatever it needs to be so that I am constantly training my thoughts. I'm constantly keeping my energy level where it needs to be. I'm really, really, really attuned to vibrational energy. And I'm really, really attuned to who gets to be in my space, who gets to be around me. No narcissists in my zone anymore. Already had that. I had to deal with one as a business partner that really super sucked, and had to get that person out. I have a friend who says no icky people under the tent. Yeah, I defend my light with my life. Your mindset is super important. You have to keep your vibrational energy super high. That's what's going to help you look confident as hell in negotiations and any time in your life. Confidence is a habit. It is something you have to work on at all times, and you have to remember and you have to remind yourself that you are unstoppable. Her lawyer is wanting mediation, but I don't want to give away anymore. What are your thoughts? So my thoughts are this. When you go to a mediation with a narcissist, yeah, and you can settle a case in mediation with a narcissist, by the way. A lot of people say don't bother mediation or don't bother trying to settle a case with a narcissist. It never works. And every time I see that, I think, no, that's not true. I've had many, many narcissists settle in mediation. But the key is that when you go to mediation with a narcissist, you can't just walk in and think you're going to talk it through and resolve differences, because there's one key element that's missing when you're dealing with a narcissist in mediation, and that is they don't actually really want to settle the case because they get narcissistic supply from jerking you around. So how do you get them to settle a case in mediation? Well, you have to have a super strong strategy, and you have to have created enough leverage that when you get to that mediation, they feel motivated and squeezed and incentivized into settling the case. That's what I teach people how to do with my SLAY system and my SLAY program. Strategy, leverage, anticipate what the narcissist is going to do, and focus on your case and you, and creating an offensive position. So, but leverage is really, really key. So the mistake that people make a lot of times when they go into a mediation with a narcissist is that they think that they're dealing with, a reasonable person, or you just think, oh, it's perfunctory, the court's making me do it, so let's just get this over with, and hopefully the mediator will be able to help, and hopefully the lawyers will be able to help, and it just ends up being a really super expensive conversation that doesn't really get you anywhere. So yes, you should mediate, and here's why. Because when you go to mediation, if you get them to sign a settlement agreement in mediation, then the case is done. If you go to court and you go before a judge and the judge hands down a decision, then that decision is appealable. So you could win 100% of everything that you want in court and still not be done, because they can appeal that. And even worse, they can file a motion to stay the orders, meaning whatever you won in that final judgment is just going to be held in limbo, and you're not going to get to enjoy the fruits of that until after the appeal is done. Appeals take a long time and they're very expensive. Now, oftentimes appeals aren't successful. Most of the time, people who appeal don't prevail. I mean, it's like a 15% win rate or something if you're appealing. But even so, you're still dealing with this person. So it is definitely better to try to get them to sign an agreement. But don't go back and forth between your attorneys to try to get them to sign an agreement. You definitely want them to sign in mediation when all these people are around them, the mediator, the other lawyers, because one of the things about narcissists is that they desperately do not want to look bad in front of people that they respect, and especially the judge. So if you get to mediation and you've got all your leverage ready to go, and all of these bits of information that they're realizing is going to come out if they end up in front of a judge, or that they might end up with a bad result or something like that, that's how you squeeze them into settling a case at mediation. So I do recommend that you try to mediate again. And PR, it's kind of a long way of answering your question, but I thought it was a really good one and a great opportunity for me to tell you why I think mediation is a good idea, even if you're dealing with a narcissist, and sometimes especially if you're dealing with a narcissist, because that's where your leverage is going to be the best. Because all narcissists are driven by supply, And a big piece of that supply is how they look in front of people. So looking bad in front of a judge, or maybe having information come out about them that's public that they don't want to come out about them, is a really, really nice form of kind of ethically manipulating the manipulator into signing an agreement. So I call it an ethical manipulation, because you're just taking information that you have and using it against them. And all narcissists are liars and do things that you can definitely use against them. So, you're just trying to get back to what's fair. A lot of people say, I don't want to fight. I don't want to spend a lot of money. If you feel that way, then you've got to create leverage.
Now, if you're getting ready to go to court with a narcissist, whether it's divorce court or otherwise, you're going to want to be fully prepared, and you're definitely not going to want to walk in without having the best possible strategies and tactics at your fingertips, because this is going to be no cakewalk. The narcissist is going to make it as difficult for you as possible. So stay tuned and listen to the end so that you can get all the tips and you'll be all ready to go. All right, number one is have everything that's possible to be in writing, because narcissists by their nature are pathological liars. So they are going to lie about things that you said, you didn't say, conversations that took place or didn't take place, what they said or didn't say, whatever it is, it's going to be twisted, it's going to be manipulated. So you want to make sure that you can keep everything in writing to the extent that that's possible. So, and ideally it would be like in an email or something like that, where you actually have the timestamp on it, you have the date stamp on it, you have the email, who it came from, the email address of who it came from, who it went to, that sort of thing. Text messages are admissible in court nowadays, but it's just a little bit more difficult to authenticate them when it comes to evidence in court. So it is better if you can do it via email if possible. The other problem with text messages is that they tend to go away after a certain period of time. And especially if you don't save them, it's really difficult to go back and find them. The phone companies don't even really keep them either. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that you use email if possible. If you're co-parenting, having a co-parenting app such as Talking Parents or Fair or Our Family Wizard, something like that is always a good idea too. I mean, the bottom line is that they're going to try to get you away from this writing. They don't want to be in writing because they know that it will box them in, and narcissists don't want to be boxed in. So they're going to do whatever they can to get you to meet with them, to go against what you said before, things like that. They're just, let's just meet. We don't need the writing. We don't need all these other people around us. Let's just meet at Starbucks or whatever. And the reason why they're doing that is to get you into a place where they can manipulate you again. So by keeping everything in writing as much as possible, you can minimize that problem. Now, what the flip side of this, by the way, is for you to remember that every single writing is a potential trial exhibit. So if you don't want to see it again, then don't put it in writing. The way I just say it to people is, just imagine the judge is leaning over your shoulder and watching you write that text or that email. And before you hit send, say, Judge, Your Honor, is this something that you would want to see? And if it's not, then you don't want to send it. Okay, the second thing that you're going to want to do is use video for depositions. And the reason why you're going to want to do this, and yes, it's a little bit more expensive. You have to pay for the court reporter. Now you have to pay for the videographer. But it goes back again to boxing that narcissist in. If you box them in enough, then they will act like the spoiled temper tantrum child, and their true colors will show up, and you'll be able to use that against them down the road. So, but just trying to control their behavior using video will definitely help, because if you don't use video, what they tend to do is do things that don't show up on the record, meaning the court reporter will take down everything that's actually said in the deposition. When you look at the deposition transcript, it'll just say question, blah, 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 answer, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing around it. There's no description given around it. So if that narcissist is giving you dirty looks, making faces, all the things that they do, and they do, then nothing is taken down. Now, for me as a lawyer, there have been many times where I've had to say, let the record reflect that so-and-so is making faces at so-and-so. But, you know, how many times can the lawyer do that over and over again without just constantly interrupting the deposition? So by videoing it, you actually see what, how they're responding and how they're acting. Plus it makes them behave a little bit better because they're a little less likely to be a complete jackass if there's a video shining in their face. If this is all sounding really good to you so far, put a thumbs up in the comments. Okay, number 3 is focus on your own case. So this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see lawyers make. I see lots and lots of people make, because it's just natural to want to focus on what's the other side doing and all of their flaws and all of their mistakes and how is he or she getting away with this and look at how badly they're behaving and isn't the judge going to see that? And the answer is maybe and probably, and yeah, you will want to bring out all of the other bad behavior of the other side. But, you know, just like in football, if all you have is a good defense and you have no offense whatsoever, then you never score any points, right? So you want to make sure that your case is as strong as possible. Focus on your case. Make sure that the facts and the supporting documentation and everything is done to create your case and make sure it's super strong. And then for the other side, you create that leverage to help motivate them into wanting to come to the table to potentially have a settlement conversation with you. Or, you know, you have all the points that make them look bad. Yes, you know, anything that shoots their credibility. You know, when people say, oh, how are they getting away with this? They're lying all the time. Why? How are they getting away with this? So the thing I want you to remember, here's a good reality check for you, and that is, who would stop them from getting away with something? The only person who has any power over another human being in the court system is the judge, not the lawyers, not you, not family members. No one has the power to order someone to do anything other than the judge. And how do you get in front of the judge? Through motions, through hearings, through trials, things like that. Things have to be filed in the court system, and then you have to have a hearing, bring it to the judge's attention, and only at that point can you potentially rein in their behavior. But while you're waiting for that time to get in front of the judge, you're just documenting, you're keeping track, keeping track, keeping track. So that's how you're building your case. If you're dealing with a child custody situation, for example, and the person just never shows up to get the kids, or they show up late, or they constantly change the time, you just document it, document it, document it, and then when it comes time to present that to the court, you have a nice log of exactly what happened and when, what time did they show up, what time did they leave, you know, all of that. So eventually it will work in your favor. But just remember that you want to keep track of your own case and make sure that that is bolstered as much as possible, and then highlight the weaknesses of the other person as well. Okay, number 4 is what I started to allude to in number 3, which is document, document, document. And I cannot stress this enough. Keep really careful notes. Have an app open on your phone. Have a journal, a log, whatever you need to do so that wherever you are, real time, you can be logging what's happening. And I have won entire cases on these types of logs. Let me tell you, they do work. It is critically important. So make sure that you're documenting, because what you're doing is you're slowly closing in on your narcissist from every angle. This is war. This is the art of war. And so you're building these tactics and you're closing in on them from various different angles. And it doesn't look like you're doing much until you've got them fully surrounded. And that's when you realize, hey, I have them. And only then is when they're going to want to start to have a conversation with you about potentially settling the case and not having to go to court, because you know that the main thing about a narcissist is that they don't want to look back. I have a lot more on this in my videos on how to negotiate with a narcissist and how to negotiate with a narcissist X, and I will drop links below to those videos. You'll definitely want to check those out. Okay, number 5, definitely do very thorough research. Have everything ready to go. Do you need appraisals? Do you need valuations? Do you need a forensic accountant? Do we need to figure out what the person's true income is by looking at their bank records? Do we need to figure out a lifestyle analysis by looking at credit card statements and bank statements and things like that? Everything needs to be ready to go, all I's dotted, all T's crossed. Don't leave any stone unturned. Don't leave anything to winging it, because whatever your weaknesses are, wherever there's that weakness in your case, that's where they're going to find you, and that's where they're going to jam their foot in and open that door and make it into a big, huge thing. So also, in being prepared, you're going to want to make sure that you do all the research for the other side. What are they going to argue? What points do they have against me? What leverage do they have against me? And then be ready to answer that. I anticipated this argument, and here's my response. Because if you're only prepared for your side, then you are only half ready to go. So make sure that you are ready for both sides, as if you're preparing for both sides. And one word about leverage, by the way, is make sure that once you've got that leverage, you use it at the most opportune time. Do not give it away too early. Do not show it to them before you get to court, because you want to use it when you need it. All right, so the last one, number 6, is to keep your emotions in check. And this is going to be one of the hardest things to do, because narcissists know how to push your buttons and they know how to manipulate you. So they're going to make faces, they're going to make little snarky comments, they're going to say things under their breath. And, so I would totally avoid making eye contact with them in the courtroom. It's not going to serve you. Just look at the judge. When you're testifying, just look at the judge. Make sure that you've practiced your testimony. I, as an attorney, go over my direct testimony with my clients. If your attorney doesn't do that as a matter of course, ask your attorney to do that with you, or ask them for the questions and have somebody else practice it with you. You want to just be able to at least control the parts that you can control, which is your direct testimony. You should basically know what those questions are going to be. Your attorney will be asking you those questions, and be ready with what you're going to say so that you're not stumped and you're not feeling nervous and anxious. You know exactly, okay, this is that question, here's how I planned to respond to it. I mean, of course you're going to answer truthfully. You just want to be prepared on how you're going to word your answers, how you're going to say it, what things you want to make sure to get in, what things you want to make sure to say, things like that. So, so that's your direct testimony. Now, as for your cross-examination, you should also see if your lawyer, I know I usually do this as a matter of course. I tell my clients what to expect for cross-examination too. I even sometimes get another lawyer in my office to do a mock cross-examination with the person and sort of beat them up a little bit, just so that they're ready. You know, the kinds of questions that I would ask under cross-examination, something like that. So the more you can be prepared, the less emotional you will be, the less anxious you will be.
So if you're dealing with a narcissist, be it a covert narcissist, a grandiose narcissist or a malignant narcissist, they engage in all kinds of behaviors, even while you are just in a relationship with them. They're gaslighting you, they're lying to you, they're manipulating you, you know, perhaps even being abusive. More than likely, they're being abusive. Some are sneakier at it than others. Covert narcissists in particular are very sneaky at it. And so if you are dealing with a covert narcissist, I have several videos on covert narcissists, including why covert narcissists are dangerous and the covert passive aggressive narcissist. And you're going to want to check out those videos for sure if you're dealing with covert narcissists. But whatever kind of narcissist you're dealing with, they are being their narcissist selves the entire time that you're in a relationship with them. So there are three phases to a narcissistic relationship. It's love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. And remember that the phases of the relationship don't actually happen in a linear fashion. They happen at the same time sometimes. They can be devaluing you while they're love bombing you. And in fact, there was a study done by a psychologist with monkeys that showed that if monkeys were given a reward for doing something good every single time, nothing happened in their brain. But if they were only given a reward intermittently, variably, where the monkeys couldn't predict when they were going to get this reward, the dopamine levels in their brain actually rose to the level of someone on cocaine. And that's what happens with a relationship with narcissists. They go back and forth. The narcissists go back and forth between love bombing and devaluing and love bombing and devaluing. And so you are left with almost being addicted to, in a physiological way, to wanting their praise, to wanting that love bomb, because they start out so charming and they really try to set themselves up to be the perfect person for you and hold out all these things that they're going to do for you, or even do things for you right at that time. I mean, if you ever watched the Dirty John miniseries, you recall that guy was just setting himself to be up to be perfect for this successful single businesswoman. He was getting her dry cleaning and making smoothies for her in the morning and all these things at the same time that he was isolating her from her family and turning people against her. So you know, they go through these phases of the relationship. So what happens when you are doing battle with a narcissist is they just become that same person, but on steroids. So it's so much worse. They turn up the heat because, unfortunately for narcissists, you know, you're either for them or you're against them. They need an endless amount of supply. And if you are cutting off that supply to them, then they just see you as the enemy. And for those of you who watch my videos on a regular basis, you know that I've had to work 2 covert narcissists out of my life, and it was not an easy thing. It wasn't husbands, but it was people that were close to me and close enough to do serious damage and cause lots and lots of trauma. And, you know, I'm telling you that if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Narcissists have a symbiotic relationship with empaths. And, you know, narcissists see that empaths have the qualities that they want. And empaths, you know, we just think that we can love everybody back to health and, you know, that we have enough love to give. And it just ends up being this black hole. And so they literally, you know, they're often called energy vampires or leeches or parasites or whatever, but they literally suck the life out of you. And it's almost like death by 1,000 cuts. And so when you go to do battle with a narcissist, they're literally turning up the heat because now you're the enemy. Now you no longer have any value for them. So there's no, like, a reasonable person, those of us who are in reasonable land, we think, oh, we can just walk away and wish each other well, and we'll come up with an agreement that's reasonable. And hey, the law provides for certain things, and depending on what kind of battle you're doing with a narcissist. But you can't, that's not how it goes with a narcissist. So if you're getting ready to do battle, or you're in the trenches of doing battle with a narcissist, there are a few things that you can do to beat them at their own game and preserve your own sanity along the way. The first thing is, don't allow them to disrespect you. When you allow them to disrespect you, you're basically giving them permission to do that. And they know how to push your buttons, let me tell you. I mean, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship with this person, they've studied you, they know exactly what your weaknesses are, and so that's where they're going to go. They're going right there to try to make you look as bad as possible. Everything you say or do is going to be turned against you, used against you, twisted, manipulated. So what you're going to have to do is just maintain your own level of dignity, maintain your own level of respect, and demand respect from them. If they are screaming, yelling, trying to talk to you in a way that's overly emotional, and they're not in control, they want you to be out of control too, because they get supply, they get narcissistic supply by seeing you squirm. So by just maintaining that, hey, we're not going to have this conversation, you're not being respectful to me, this is not productive, we'll have this conversation when you can be respectful to me. Same thing if they are lighting you up in text messages or lighting you up in emails, and saying all sorts of disrespectful things. You can just simply respond and say, I disagree with what you're saying. Please do not speak to me that way. It is disrespectful. And then respond to the parts of it that you might have to respond to, like, what time are you picking up the kids, or something like that. But other than that, you're not going to get into the trenches with them and sling that same sort of mud. You're going to demand respect from them, and you're going to condition them that this is how it's going to go. If they want you to interact with them, they're going to have to respect you, and it's going to drive them insane when you do that, believe me. Okay, the next thing that you can do is document. And we cannot say this enough, those of us who are in this field and professionals in this area. You just never know what's going to end up being your leverage. And when you're dealing with narcissists, you have to have a super strong strategy, and you have to be able to create leverage. And, I often hear people ask me, what is leverage? What does that look like? And leverage can be a smoking gun, like the one thing that for sure the narcissist doesn't want anyone to know. Or it can be something like that the narcissist is more motivated to resolve your differences than you are. Or it can be an accumulation of things. It can be, 15 different text messages that show that they're a liar. Or and you create an exhibit that shows that. It could be that they didn't show up for picking up the kids on time 20 times in a row, or they changed the schedule every single time that they were supposed to take the kids, or whatever. But it could be any accumulation of those things. And so it's really, really important to do that documentation, even if it seems mundane. Just keep the app open on your phone, the Notes app, or there's apps where you can actually pay, to have a documentation feature or whatever. But basically, you just don't really know what's going to be the pattern that you're going to be able to bring out, or what's going to be that leverage. And, for sure, the leverage is always going to be around what is their biggest motivation, which is, you know, the one thing they don't want to come out, it's going to be around their ego, because the thing about narcissists is, you know, they're just always in this mode of self-preservation. They're actually very easy to figure out. And narcissists are the most afraid, most scared little personalities on the planet. They have fragile egos because they have no sense of inner value. All of their value comes from the external. So when you are looking at your documentation and figuring out what your leverage is, you're going to want to think about what is their biggest motivation? What is it that they really don't want brought out? And what is it that's going to make them look bad? Because narcissists do not want to look bad, especially in front of people that they really respect. So if somebody is involved that they really respect, such as a mediator or other lawyers or the judge, especially the judge, they're not going to want to look bad. So document, document, document everything, okay? You never know when you're going to need it. If this is all sounding really good to you so far and you are so ready to start doing the things that I'm telling you to do, give me an amen in the comments. Okay, the third thing that you can do is figure out what kind of narcissist you're dealing with and understand what behaviors each one engages in. So some of it is similar. All narcissists engage in certain types of behaviors like gaslighting and manipulation, but they do it in subtly different ways depending on the type of narcissist that you're dealing with, whether it's covert, malignant, or grandiose. And you will want to brush up on the different types of narcissists so that you can figure out what kind you're dealing with and then find out what behaviors they engage in. And once you do that, then you will expect it. You're going to go, oh, there's that person being that covert narky self. That's what they do. And you won't take it as personally because you'll just understand that that's the way they act. Okay, so the third thing you can do is figure out what kind of narcissist you're dealing with, brush up on the types of behaviors associated with each narcissist, and then expect them to act like themselves. They don't change. Narcissists do not change. They can pretend like they know, they're very good at pretending. They do know what good behavior looks like. That's how they were able to rope you in the first place, and that's how they parade around the world and get people to think that they're so great. Especially covert narcissists are really, really good at that. But you're going to want to figure out what kind you're dealing with and then not be surprised when they just act like themselves. Okay, the fourth thing is when you are getting ready to ask for something from the narcissist, you're going to want to ask for way more than what you actually want. The narcissist is going to want to feel like they beat you, like they got to you, because they get supply from that. Their egos won't allow you to win, at least on paper. So if you are ready to just give them a certain amount, give away a certain amount that you control, that you decide ahead of time, I'm going to be willing to take this much, or I'll be willing to give up this thing, but act like it's like the one thing you definitely don't want to give up. Because if there's something that's super important to you, then that's the one thing that they're going to want to make sure that you don't get. So you're kind of playing a game here, and I call it ethically manipulating the manipulator. But basically, you're going to want to give them certain things that you kind of decide ahead of time that you were willing to give, and then work back to what you actually want. And then when you get there, you have to act like, oh my God, I can't believe I had to give up so much, and this is just awful, and oh, you really took advantage of me and whatever. But you can just go home and smile and pour your champagne or whatever and do it in the privacy of your own home after you've won the things that you wanted. And number 5, the last one is, I take it from like this old commercial, never let them see you sweat, but really you never want to let them see you sweat, cry, get emotional, lose control, then they get supply from that. If you need to, cry in the bathroom, and then come back out, splash water on your face, if you wear makeup and you're a female, whatever, put makeup back on. If you're a guy, just splash water in your face, comb your hair, whatever you need to do to just maintain control, and never let them see that they are getting under your skin, because as soon as they see that, then they know they have you. If you know you're going to have to interact with them, and let's say it's a school meeting or it's a mediation or something like that, don't get there too early, get there on time. Don't give them opportunities to grab you and try to manipulate you, because that's when they'll start to get under your skin again. Remember what I said at the beginning, these narcissists, they know how to push your buttons. So never let them see you sweat. I'm going to give you 5 ways to make sure that you beat a narcissist in court. So you're going to want to make sure you stay till the end. You're going to want to make sure that you save this video. You're going to want to make sure you share it out. You're going to want to make sure that you go ahead and watch it over and over again, because I'm going to give you all the ways to make sure that you beat a narcissist in court. Okay. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to remember the acronym, knock them dead. All right. So DEADD. So 2 D's, but DEADD, knock them dead. So the first D stands for document everything. And I mean everything. You're going to want to journal everything. You're going to want to document everything. In my Slay program, I actually have 12 different things that you're going to want to be documenting, but you're going to want to document everything with regard to finances, to your children, if you have children, anything that they do that seems out of the ordinary. I know it's a pain, but if you have a notes app or something, just note it, because you're not going to remember. But even if it's crazy, I don't know if I should write that down, but you just never know. And there's many different ways that these things come into play. So you will want to make sure that you document everything, whether it's a business case or a family law case, or it's against a business partner. Maybe it's a case against an employer or something like that. It always is something that you're going to need to be doing, is documenting. Whether it's a timeline form, you end up needing it for the statutes to prove different elements of a statute. You definitely need documentation. I also have a podcast where I ended up interviewing one of the people who use my Slay for Biz program, Sharon Scott. I highly recommend that you check that out, because she talked about how she used my program and it really helped her a lot. So definitely document everything. The next thing is the E, emotions. Keep them in check. You're definitely going to want to keep your emotions in check. There's so many different reasons that you want to keep your emotions in check. I mean, for one thing is that they want to trigger you constantly. They love to see you squirm, so they get supply from it. And you really don't want to give them narcissistic supply, obviously, because that's no fun. I mean, they just get the satisfaction of seeing you go crazy, right? I mean, why do you want to do that? But then the next thing is that they use your reaction against you. They go, look, there's the crazy one. There's the one that's the problem. And they will use that against you in a number of ways. They use the emails against you, the texts against you. They may even be videotaping against you. They use the witnesses against you, whatever it is. So definitely keep your emotions in check. They use it for custody, so many different things. So definitely E, keep your emotions in check. And it doesn't help you when you're negotiating either, if you're all over the place when it comes to settlements, because then you end up settling for things that you regret 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road. You're like, I didn't want to settle for that. Because a lot of times you're like, oh, I just ended up settling for that because I just wanted it to be done. I just wanted it to be over with, or maybe you were just feeling pressured. Really try to keep your emotions in check. And by the way, if you're really, really struggling with that, because a lot of times when you've been dealing with a narcissist for a long period of time, you are in a trauma state, especially PTSD sometimes. I do have a partnership with BetterHelp. You can go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung. I do receive commissions on that. It doesn't cost you anymore. We have a partnership with them because I wanted to have a partnership with a service that we could trust, that we could recommend. If you are struggling, go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung so that you can get the help and support that you need if you're having trouble with your emotions and you're having trouble with trauma. So that's the E. The next one is always wear the white hat. That's the A. Always wear the white hat. And what do I mean by that? I mean by that in that you want to be the one, if you end up in front of the judge, which that's what this is about, you want to be the one where the judge is like, hey, this is the person that obviously is the good one. Let the narcissist be the one who's badly behaving. A lot of times it's so easy to fall into, hey, they're behaving badly. They're doing things wrong. They did it too. I can do it too. What happens though is then you have a situation where the judge is just like seeing like two kids that are fighting. So for those of you who are out there watching, who have children and you have more than one, what happens is they just are like, oh, both of you just stop it. You know, they don't see that, oh, well, they started it or they're worse. They just see two people who just are fighting. So you want to be the one who's consistently not being in the mud with the other one. Because if you are the one who's what I call always wearing the white hat, who's not engaging, who didn't respond, who didn't get into it, and the other one is always the one who's constantly the badly behaved one, then it makes it really, really obvious who is the bad one. And it's kind of hand in hand with keeping your emotions in check, but it's even one step much, much further than that. You really, really want to be the one who's just always behaving, always doing the right thing. So just kind of imagine that the judge is sort of walking around with you and watching every single thing that you're doing. Always wear the white hat. That's the A. All right. So the next one is don't go anywhere alone. That's the D, the first D in Knock 'em Dead. And we're going through all the elements of what to do to beat a narcissist in court. So, you know, this is because they're going to say you followed them, you did this, you did that. They lie all the time. So they're constantly going to be saying that you were menacing, that you were threatening, that you did this with the kids, or that you touched somebody inappropriately, or whatever it is that they make up constantly. And then you end up having to defend against these ridiculous claims. So you want to make sure that you have people around as much as you possibly can. If you have children, for example, have your exchanges for custody at daycares, at schools, you know, at shopping plazas or places where people are around, because you just don't want situations where they can make things up about what's going on. And in that same vein, by the way, you're going to want to make sure that even depositions are videotaped if possible. And I have actually a whole video on how to beat a narcissist in mediation. I talk about that in there, and you should definitely check out that video as well, because a lot of you who are trying to beat a narcissist in court are also mediating with a narcissist, and you should definitely check out that video as well. And I also do have a whole video where I interviewed Judge Lynn Toller. You guys should definitely check out that video too. She was the judge on divorce court for 17 years, and her video interview was very, very highly fascinating. So definitely check that out too. And if you guys are so ready to knock them dead, put knock them dead in the comments, because I'm so ready to help you knock them dead. And if you've been following along with how to beat a narcissist in court, and you've been following along with my acronym, you know there's one more D. The last D is decoys. It stands for decoys. And what I mean by decoys is you really do not want to give them your best offer or give them any of your best evidence or show them any of your cards or show them any of your hands until you're ready to unveil it in court or when you're ready. I mean, a lot of times while you're standing on the courthouse steps or even at lunch during the trial, they want to settle, they're ready to have settlement talks, or even maybe the eve before trial or a couple of days before, they're ready to have some settlement talks at that point or something. And you might be ready at that point as well, but you've got to have your strategy, your leverage, have anticipated, your focus on you, your position, that being on the offensive, my whole SLAY methodology. At that point, you do not give them your best offer. You do not show your best evidence. You decoy the whole thing until you are so ready to go. Basically, the way I look at it is you're building an invisible fence around them until you turn on the lights and they realize, oh my God, I'm totally pinned in. At that point, they have no choice but to resolve the issue with you or resolve the issues with you. So you're appearing weak, you're feigning ignorance, you know, oh, I don't know, I have no idea. Let them think that they're winning. Let them go all crazy on you. Allow them to go off. A lot of times that's good for you. It's hard, I know, because you don't want them to get away with anything a lot of times during the case. But sometimes if you have an ongoing case, it's good to let them screw up, because those little battles that show that they're screwing up help you to demonstrate to the judge who they actually are. So let them do that, you know, because then you can show patterns that they aren't doing what they're supposed to do, show patterns that they're liars, show patterns that they are bad parents or terrible with money or whatever it is that you need to show. It actually ends up helping you in the end, or that they have anger issues or whatever it is. So that definitely helps you. Sometimes it's really, really good to feign that you're weak, feign that you're ignorant. A lot of times, by the way, you can pretend like there's a particular thing that you really, really want, and it's not the thing that you really, really want, because then, you know, they go after that, you know, because they're going to go after the thing that they think that you really, really want, right? So let them go after that particular thing. And this is really, really, really one of the most important things that you can do when you are dealing with a narcissist, either in your personal life, in your business life, or when you are negotiating with a narcissist. Is such a really, really great tool that you will have in your toolbox. And I actually say that you can use this either as, in a way, sort of a weapon or as a shield. Because when you're dealing with a narcissist, you definitely need both. And you can use this right away and in any time when you're communicating with a narcissist. It means, in a way, is like you literally become like a boulder. And in a way, it's more like a boulder than a rock, but you can kind of think of it as gray rock. So you become devoid of emotion. You become immovable. Just think of yourself as kind of a gray rock. What does a gray rock do? What does a gray boulder do? It just sits there. It doesn't get triggered. It doesn't move. It just literally sits there. I mean, I remember doing this when I was dealing with a couple of narcissists in my life. And I didn't know the term gray rock at the time. I just kind of instinctively knew to do this. It's kind of like I knew, don't give them the satisfaction. You know that they're trying to get under your skin. You know that they want to get some kind of rise out of you. You just don't give it to them. Because what happens is they get narcissistic supply out of that. They love to see you go crazy. They love to see you get triggered. You just have to do whatever you can not to allow yourself to show that. And that's why you really need to have those boundaries. That's why you really need to keep your interactions as brief as possible, because you know that you're going to get triggered, especially if you've had a longer term relationship with them. They know how to push your buttons. They just know exactly what to do to push those buttons. So you just try to be steadfast. You try to be indifferent. So here are some good examples. They text you something where they want some big dramatic response out of you. Just write back K, just like the one letter, just the letter K or KK, something like that. You know, like my teenage daughter will respond like that sometimes. I mean, she's not trying to be like gray rock to me. She'll just do that to be cute sometimes, but you can just do that. Or you can just say, okay, if that's what you want or whatever. I mean, you know, just make it clear, like, I'm not affected by you. I am so not affected by you. I mean, I remember one time there was somebody in my family who was like really trying to get, you know, some emotional response going on. You know, you just like put it back on them like, oh, geez, you know, I'm sure traveling is really stressful or something like that. Like you just like put it on them. Like, I'm sure you're really stressed out right now. You know, you don't even like take it personally at all. Like, I'm sure you're really stressed out right now. I'm sure you must be going through a really tough time. You don't even make it seem like whatever they're saying about you has anything to do with you at all. Because a lot of times, not only do they get narcissistic supply from it, they're also trying to get you to do something that they can then use against you for custody, use against you in court to make it look like you're crazy, something like that. So, you know, don't give that to them, because then they'll be able to show the judge or the mediator, see, I told you that person is unbalanced or bipolar or whatever it is that they're trying to say about you, right? So you got to be really, really careful about that, because there it is in black and white. You know, you just give them that one time, or worse, they use it against you for a potential restraining order. I've seen that happen before. I mean, just that one time that you throw that one thing, or you slam that door, or you yell, and now the cops are showing up at your house and you're suddenly getting arrested for domestic violence. And there it is. You don't want to have that happen. You got to stay in control of your emotions. You got to be that gray rock, right? And especially because, you know, if they show up at your kid's soccer game with that new form of supply or whatever, and they want you to say something so bad, you just say, oh, hello to their new person. How are you? So nice to meet you. You just smile. Don't say a word. Don't say a word. Nothing other than that, because that is what they want. They want so much to get under your skin, so much. Think about Ted Lasso, right? I don't know if you guys watch that show, but you know, I actually have a video, by the way, on the narcissistic characters in Ted Lasso, which you could definitely check out if you'd like. But you know, there's actually a scene in that show where Rebecca's ex-husband comes in and he wants to just tell her about how he has gotten his new girlfriend pregnant. And you could tell that she's bothered by the fact that he did that. And he says, oh, I guess I had to, find the right person or something like that. And, it just so gets under her skin. She just doesn't want to let on. Just don't let on. That's the right thing to do, because that is exactly what they want. Don't give them the satisfaction. Don't let them see you sweat. So I want you to put that in the comments right now. Don't let them see you sweat, because that's what they want. Go scream in the shower, go cry in the shower, scream in your pillow, do whatever you need to do. But you are a gray rock in front of their face. That's what you have to do. I mean, you just, in front of their face, you just smile. Even when they're gaslighting you and they're saying things, like, we had that conversation and this is how it went. I want you to smile and say, oh, you just obviously aren't remembering correctly. Oh, you just must not remember, or we remember it differently. Just say it like that. We just remember it differently. And, we can agree to disagree. And that's it. And you can just smile and walk away. The rest of what you want to say can just be silent. Just fill in the blanks silently in your head. And you don't have to say it out loud. Karma never forgets. She's got a very long memory, and karma always comes back around, because what goes around comes around. My dad used to say, be careful what you throw up in the air, because it will come back down on your head. And it definitely does. You can just say, like, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's fine, just because we disagree, you don't have to be disagreeable. That's totally fine too. And you can fake it. I call it ethically manipulating the manipulator. You don't have to be anything other than whole and complete. And you are planted firmly in your power. You know who you are. And this is you knowing who you are, right? And yeah, it can be exhausting. It can be draining. And that's why you keep those interactions as brief as possible. I mean, you really don't want to spend a whole lot of time around this person, because they do want to drain you. They do want to trigger you. They're constantly needling you. They're constantly trying to get some kind of reaction out of you, because that's what feeds them. That's their food. That's their lifeblood. That's their oxygen. If they don't get that, then they're going to try to, slither on down the road to get it from somebody else. It's their way. It's how they're built. And you're not going to change that. You're never going to change that. I recently had a conversation with Marissa Peer, who's one of the most renowned therapists in the world. She won't even counsel narcissists. She won't even take them in her practice. You know why? Because she knows she can't change them. Think about that. She knows that there's nothing she can do for them. She'll help the people who've been traumatized by them, because she knows that she can help them. She knows that she can do something for them, but she can't help the narcissist. You know why? Because they have no self-awareness. They can't be helped. They can't be saved. So if the therapist who does hypnotherapy, who literally trains thousands of therapists all over the world, cannot help them, you cannot help them. You can't do it. You literally do not have the tools to do it. So what can you do when you're around them? You can just go gray rock. You use that as your shield. You use that as your weapon. You say, okay, if that's what you want to think, sure, I agree with you, great, whatever. You just give them nothing, because you know why? They get bored. They get bored with a gray rock eventually. They're not interested in the gray rock. They don't care about the gray rock anymore. They move on from the gray rock because they want supply. They're not getting it from something that's not giving them any kind of feedback. My husband and I used to have somebody in our family who was, like trying to get a rise out of somebody. And then as soon as the person would finally be upset, like angry, like on the verge of tears, this person would be like, oh, now we're having a conversation. All right, now we're getting going. This is good. What? Yeah, but that's to that person, that's what that meant, because that person was finally getting fed. You don't want to be food for a narcissist. That's no fun. So just, become a gray rock, protect yourself, use that as your shield. You don't go to war without weapons. You don't get ahead in battle without weapons. You don't go to war without a shield to protect yourself, right? And when you're in battle with a narcissist, you need weapons. When you're dealing with a narcissist, it's either black or white. That's how they see things. You're either for them or you're against them. When you're in that discard phase, you are definitely against them because you become public enemy number one. So when it becomes time to say goodbye, they want to make sure that you go down before they go down. They want the whole world to see that you were wrong. This is when you see the birth of the smear campaign, right? So you got to have protection, and your protection will be that gray rock. Just become a gray rock. So no more supply, no supply for you, because you are no longer giving yourself to someone who doesn't deserve it. Psychological tricks to win any negotiation. And you know what? Sometimes the first negotiation that you're doing is in the morning when you wake up with your own self, with your own self-worth. I always say I can't even leave my own thoughts unsupervised. Okay, so the very first thing is when you're walking into that room to negotiate, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to walk in with power. I want you to walk in with total confidence, because the first thing that people notice is that with that air of power, because that is the first thing that people feel. You tell people what to think. People will think what you tell them to think before you even open your mouth. Use that body language. All right. You walk in with total confidence, and then you use their name, even like being willing to negotiate their place, all of that sort of thing. And by the way, your colors, the colors that you wear, that can matter too. And I actually have a whole video on just that topic, but that's for another whole video, and you can go and check that out. Clothing colors totally can make a difference. Definitely check out that video on that topic. All right. By the way, you're definitely going to want to stay till the end, because, the end is, of course, I'm going to save the best one for the last. All right. Number 2, know your opponent's weaknesses, of course, because you're going to do your research. You're going to do your research. You're going to do your research for yourself. You're going to figure out what are your arguments. You're going to do that. What people don't think about is doing the arguments, figuring it out what the other side is going to argue. So many people forget about thinking about what the other side is going to argue as if you are in the other side's shoes. And then this is like so good. This is a psychological trick that is like the best. You ready for it? When you go in, address their arguments before they even have a chance to bring them up. What you're going to do is you're going to say, I know that you're going to say this, that you're going to argue this. And here's my response. Here's why your argument is crap. So now you've already taken the wind out of their sails. That is such a good psychological trick to win against them in any negotiation. Okay. So now you've walked in with confidence. You've used their name. You've said, hi, hello, I'm here. And you've sat down, you've already said, oh, I know what you're about to argue. You're going to say this, and here's why your argument is total crap. Now, what are they going to do? So that's number 1 and 2. Pretty good, right? I still got 4 more to go. Stay with me. Number three is be completely and totally unflappable no matter what. They can say whatever they want to say, and you're just like, Because you know what? They are trying to trigger you, especially those narcissists. They want to trigger you. That is what they want to do so bad. So bad. They try so hard to trigger you. And you're just like, So I want you to stay strong. Stay strong. And I want you to put that in the comments right now. Stay strong. You heard what they said, but you're staying strong, right? You're not taking the bait, staying strong. Number 4 is you're reading the other person's emotions and you're mirroring them. That kind of like throws them off their game too. You're like, oh, okay. Like you're kind of empathizing with them. You're like kind of there with them. That's really, really important to kind of like mirror them, because you want to just let them know that you're kind of there with them. You're empathizing with them. You let them know you're feeling them. People want to know that they matter. They want to know, they want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, they want to know that they matter. All people want to feel valued, and no one is walking away, whatever their worst case scenario is. It's not happening, okay? I mean, both sides are going to have to give a little here. They're going to have to feel like they're feeling seen and heard in this situation. So make sure you're reading their emotions. You kind of barter a little bit with this, okay? So that's number 4. Number 5 is you use my slay approach. Yes, you want to slay this negotiation, and how you slay the negotiation is you use my slay approach. Strategy, leverage, anticipate, and focus on you. You have to have a super strong strategy. You use invincible leverage. You anticipate what the narcissist is going to do and being 2 steps ahead of them, and you focus on you, your case, and your position. Right? Strategy. You have a super strong strategy, leverage, invincible leverage, especially with a narcissist. And remember, with a narcissist, you're focusing on their supply. I've got lots and lots of other videos on all that stuff. And you got to get my slay program to get the good stuff on that. Right? And number 6, really good psychological trick is always be ready to walk away. Always be ready to walk, because if you aren't, they know they have you, right? All right. So 5 tactics to put a narcissist in their place. All right. So number 1 tactic to put a narcissist in their place is create boundaries. This is sometimes the hardest thing to start with, because they hate this. And it's so hard for you, because this is the very first thing that they make sure that you don't have. They come in, they take over. It's like they rock your world and the stars have aligned. And it's almost like this gas that's come in and permeated every cell of your body, and in your nose and in your eyes and in your breath and in your lungs. And when they come in, they come in. That's what that whole love bombing process is. They're blowing up your phone, they're blowing up your email, and they have to meet everybody in your world. And this is business or personal, by the way. And it's why wait, and let's get to the next level as soon as possible. And if it's romantic, it's, moving in, and it's meeting the family, and it's get married, and the whole thing. And even if it's business, it's let's be business partners and let's sign contracts. Whatever that next step is, it's as quick as possible. So it's no boundaries, right? And if it's family, it's the same thing, no boundaries. My husband and I have a narcissist in our family, and we've had to create really strict boundaries, and it's hard. This is the hardest part, because they don't want it. They want you to have boundaries. They're super secretive, and they don't want you looking at their phone, and they don't want to tell you things, and they don't want you touching their stuff. But they definitely don't want you to create boundaries. So this is the hardest thing. But if you can create boundaries and you can draw those lines and then keep those boundaries in place, that is the best place to start. As far as putting a narcissist in their place, start with some boundaries. Even if they're small, just stop walking backward. Stop retreating, start walking forward a little bit. Stop retreating, start walking forward, keep those boundaries in place. Can't speak to me that way. I will have a conversation with you when you are calm. That's a boundary. I will not be spoken to in a disrespectful manner. That's a boundary. We'll have a conversation later. That in and of itself is a boundary. So create boundaries. That's number one. Number two, call them out when things aren't adding up. I was so guilty of this when I was dealing with a narcissistic business partner. I would not call out my narcissistic business partner a lot of times when things weren't adding up. I would see things happening and I'd be like, do I really want to have this conversation? It's uncomfortable. Does it really matter that much? I mean, these are the kinds of things I would say to myself. Is it worth the conversation that I'm going to have? Is there a way around it? Maybe I should just take care of it myself. It's easier to just deal with it. These are the things that I would end up doing. That's not the best way to handle these things a lot of times. Call them out when things aren't adding up. So that's number two. Number three, stop defending yourself. Don't defend yourself when they attack you. And I have a whole video on that. Stop defending yourself. So that's number three tactic to put a narcissist in their place. Number four, stand your ground when they try to move goalposts, especially in negotiations, and they move goalposts all the time. I have a whole video on why narcissists move goalposts. It's all about their narcissistic supply and all of that. You don't want to deal with that, but they do enjoy the process of making you squirm and manipulating you and all of that. But definitely check out my video on this topic and just put in the comments right now, I am strong because you are. You can get past this. You are stronger than this. You're so much stronger than you think you are. You really are. You're so much stronger than you think you are. And you're so much smarter than you think you are, by the way. That's number four. And by the way, if you need extra help and support, go to betterhelp.com. Get the help and support that you need. I have a partnership with betterhelp.com. And you can get help and support from them if you don't have another place to get help. They provide online therapy and they are fantastic. We do get commissions from them, but we do offer that as a service if you don't have another place to get the help and support that you need. It's betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung, and we only recommend services that we trust. And then number five tactic to put a narcissist in their place. This is the best one because this cuts off their supply source completely. And that is create an exit plan and then stick to it, but do not let them know what it is. You got to keep it secret. You're creating your stash of cash. You're figuring out where it is that you're going to go, what it is that you're going to do, what your leverage is going to be. You're creating invisible fence with that, around them. This is my SLAY methodology: strategy, leverage, anticipate what they're going to do, stay 2 steps ahead of them, focus on you, your case, your position, whatever it is, you being on the offensive. That's what you're going to do. And it works. It always works. I promise you that it does.
And now we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts. One of the things that I say that people should definitely do is document.
Yes,
And I know you tell your clients that too.
Thing. It's a good place to start because I think it is. If it's the only do you do, you're in good shape. And I don't just use this document recommendation just in marriages and close relationships and divorces. I make it a strong suggestion in workplace issues, in other kinds of disputes you may be having, sometimes even in family issues. And it's interesting, my motivation for documentation, as you can imagine, it's to substantiate a legal argument, yes. but it's also to help with your sanity. Because sometimes people are like, no, maybe that didn't happen. I'm like, no, sweetie, in your journal on January 5th, it happened. You wrote it down. They're like, oh, yeah. So, the narcissistic relationships are absolutely impacted by euphoric recall. People strangely are able to remember the good stuff about these really bad relationships. The documentation sometimes becomes a place where you can say, yeah, no, this isn't healthy.
Well, it's that, and I would add to that the reason, another really good reason to document is that narcissists are pathological liars. So you will catch them in lies if you document. And I've won entire cases on people's notes. So, and there's really no limit to how detailed you can be. It's really kind of just how meticulous you want to be, because if they're late for picking up the kids, if they're late for a payment on something, if they made a snide remark, if they wrote an email that was not reflective of a conversation and they tried to pawn it off as a conversation that you had, something like that, just any little thing that just seems off to you, just take note of it. Because, when you ask the question, how is he or she getting away with this, which you're going to ask that, and I always say there's no like divorce fairies that come out and stop people from doing things. So, they won't get away with it if you end up in front of the judge and you have the proper documentation.
It is I always say to people, want to know how you know you're being gaslighted or in a relationship with a narcissist? I'll tell you. In arguments, you put text messages in front of them, you feel compelled to record conversations, and you feel the need to write long novels of emails to them to explain your feelings. You're doing that because you're not being heard and because you are being gaslighted so much that you have to show them this proof. This is taking this to another level and for a different reason. Again, it's to provide that substantiation. And it's not just about writing things down, it's about saving everything. You must save every text message. You must save every voicemail. You must save every email. Nothing can go. You're going to start to feel like a hoarder before this is done, but you're going to have to do it because sometimes it's just that one message. And one thing I do also strongly encourage people to do, print it all out. And there's actually apps out there that allow you to download all your text messages and print them all out. Create a printout because in case something blows up with your phone or your email server or something, then at least you have the hard evidence. It's got to have dates, times, all of that. Print it all out. You might even want to get into like a once-a-month cycle where you print everything out and put it someplace safe.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to just make a comment on what you just said. Number one is for your own sake too. Remember that every text and every email and every writing is a potential trial exhibit. So if you don't want to see it again,
Thank you.
Do not write it.
Yep, I love that.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, it will, if you don't want to see it again at a very inopportune time, meaning like in front of the judge, where you're now having to explain and defend yourself, don't write it, don't send it.
But this becomes a great point of leverage because I'll tell you, nothing incenses a narcissist more than when you're not giving them equally long, bizarre text, like those long text messages that require you to click again to see the whole thing.
Right.
So what happens is if you give brief responses like, okay,
Yes.
let's talk later, they're going to just give you verbal
Correct.
diarrhea,
Which is
great. So
Great
it's just, you
stuff.
get two for the price of one.
Yeah.
You don't engage and put your stuff down where you don't want it to be, and you get them just sort of putting it all out there, which you now have for later. So that's good.
And the other point I wanted to make about what you said was, you feel this need to show them and defend it, prove to them that what they said was wrong, whatever. Don't do that.
No, I agree. Yep.
Don't do that. That's your leverage. Don't resist the urge to want to do that in the moment and prove to them. So listen, people, you're dealing with narcissists. Narcissists are not going to accept constructive feedback and make changes to their behavior based on your feedback and reflect on it and all of that stuff. It's not happening. So you can show them a text message that directly counteracts exactly what they just said, proves that they're lying, and somehow they will manipulate that away that it's not a lie. So, and even if it makes no sense whatsoever, I mean, sometimes they say things that make no sense whatsoever. But just resist that urge to want to show them the leverage. That would be a don't.
Yes,
Create your leverage. Do that, but don't give it away too early.
Right. And it's a classic. It's a poker game. You would not ever sit in a casino and say, or a card game and say, "Look at my cards, everyone.
Yeah.
Take a look, and now let's bet." So it's the same thing. It's just playing poker. What are some of the other big do's?
So I would say that you want to involve people that are going to be able to support you, for sure. So you want to have a definite support system, but not people that are going to fan the flames and that sort of thing. So, have a support team around you. Get a really good lawyer who understands narcissism. We talked about that in the last video too. So if you haven't watched that video, you should go check it out.
Get a really good psychologist or therapist who understands narcissism as well.
Yeah.
I cannot stress this one enough. It's not because I'm trying to create business for my field, but this idea of a support system, a lot of the people around you cannot have this conversation. If they've never experienced it, I'm amazed at how many people, my friends even, read my books and they're like, this seems really interesting, but I don't get it. Now it doesn't bother me because it's like, okay, I get that you don't get it. But if I was going through a narcissistic relationship, I would feel very gaslighted and lost. So the beauty of therapy with a therapist who understands narcissism is they get it, and the kinds of support and feedback you'll get from them will not leave you feeling that you've lost your mind, but rather that you feel understood and supported. So I do think you need to choose those, and you have to choose where you have the conversations. Not everyone in your network can hear the conversation.
Yeah, that's
They can't.
definitely
Yeah,
true.
Yeah. Anything else you'd say about that?
So the other thing is to use video for depositions.
Interesting.
A lot of people say, well, that's more expensive. Now we have to pay for a videographer. Well, okay, I'm going to tell you, you're already paying a court reporter. You're already paying your lawyer. You're going through this expense. Don't cheap out and not spend an extra couple $100 for the videographer, because what happens with the depositions is the court reporter can only take down, what is your name? My name is, John Adams or whatever. And then so when you see it on the page, it just looks
Very
like
different.
type.
I agree.
But what narcissists will do is they're going to try to rile you up. They're going to try to unnerve you. So they're going to make faces. They're going to make little things under their breath.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to try to do things that upset you.
Yep.
Things that they know are upsetting you. They're going to pass notes to their lawyer so that it makes it look like they're saying something about you, and you're wondering what's going on with that. And so, my normal listeners will know, like I just say, they're just less likely to act like a complete jackass if you have, because, that's how they can act, especially the grandiose ones and the malignant ones, right? So using video for deposition can definitely help to rein in their behavior.
Any other do's?
Let me see. I have gather as much supporting documentation on everything as possible. So you're going to want to, do your research. Do your research for your side. So one of the things that I say all the time is, when you're dealing with a narcissist, people tend to be so focused on defending against what that narcissist is doing that they forget to prepare their own case.
That's right. That's interesting.
And it's just like in football. If all you have is a great defense and you have no offense, then you have no case.
Right.
And if your only case is just tearing down the other person, you aren't going to get anything that you want.
So, and here's what's interesting, because people who have been in narcissistic relationships who may not have already done the reading and gotten the education, they do what anyone would do if they feel they're being attacked or their reality is being doubted. They defend themselves. So after the life history of this relationship, where all they do is defend themselves, it can be often very difficult to turn that switch off.
Right.
And even in the work I do in working with survivors of narcissistic abuse, it's that don't defend yourself part. You have to have nerves of steel when someone is hurling all these bizarre, unfounded accusations at you, to nod at them and say, okay, and then walk away. and not engage it. You really, I mean, and to me, I tell people, like, you know what? Forget all this meditation breathing. Like, this is your meditation. Like, toughening up and saying, I'm not going to respond to this. It takes more mindfulness. I mean, you could probably bend a spoon with the amount of mindfulness it takes to not defend to someone who is going after you. But you know now, after 10, 15, 20, 25 years of defending yourself against this person, it gets you nowhere.
Gets you nowhere. And
it's time to stop.
And how you will feel better. And I actually asked somebody that I worked with in my work on coaching them through dealing with litigation with a narcissist. I said, how did you feel before I started working with you? And this happened to be a guy who was dealing with a narcissist ex-wife, and he said, helpless and abused.
Yep.
And, you know, but what we did was we turned it around by creating a plan, a game plan, a framework, where he was actually going on the offensive.
Great. That's great.
And that's and that's something that's almost foreign sometimes to people when they're just so used to defending, that they can actually turn around and take the controls and actually have the narcissist begging them to resolve the case. It can happen.
Any other thoughts on do's before we turn to the don'ts?
I think that's basically what, because we covered having a strong lawyer, which is really important. We covered being prepared. You know, the only other thing I really want to say about being prepared is don't make the mistake of going into a mediation or a settlement discussion just thinking you're just going to have a conversation. You make sure you have your leverage ready to go. Make sure you are ready to go as if you're going to court, because if you want to incentivize that person to settle and save thousands and thousands of dollars on going to court, if you go to court, you're basically throwing, you know, your future destiny to the judge. And the judge might have a bad day. The judge might see things differently than you do. Judges make mistakes all the time. It's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars to go. So it's better if you can settle in mediation or in a settlement discussion, if you can. Right. But they're not going to unless you've given them the incentive to do that.
And I'm going to land it on one last do, which, and maybe it's my head as a psychologist, and I've said this, the people on my YouTube friends, I know you're going to say, again, lady, you're going to say this. Realistic expectations, radical acceptance. And the reason I say this as a do is that you almost have to get up with an intention like, okay, I got to keep it real. I know what's coming my way. Because when you do that, and again, the clients I do get to work with, you know, directly in my office, what we find is that we use our therapeutic sessions as a calibration. They're like, yeah, like, I feel like I'm slipping, and I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? And they're like, oh yeah. So it's so easy to want to put expectations about human behavior on this narcissistic person that are realistic. Like, a normal person would do this. That's not what you're dealing with. Your expectations have to be skewed to what it is you're dealing with. Like I said, that's what I do with clients. That's, you know, therapists could do, some coaches do. I just, basically you drift back to like, but a normal person. I'm like, that's not what we're dealing with, darling. Let's get you back here.
So expect that they will do all of these things.
And so when it happens, you almost chuckle to yourself, even when some of these emails come back. And sometimes I did have the clients send me the email and say, you're not, and I'd actually start laughing. I'm like, here we go. And it's like clockwork. I mean, it's literally like clockwork. So that clockwork can be sort of settling to us.
So let's talk about the narcissist projection. How fun is that? It's so fun when they're trying to accuse you of what it is that they're doing, or accuse you of something because they want to take the responsibility off of themselves. That's what projection is. So basically what it is if you are accusing them of being irresponsible, then all of a sudden you are the irresponsible one. Or that maybe it's somebody else. They like to project onto somebody else too. I used to have a paralegal who worked for me who often always projected her irresponsibility onto somebody else. It was always because she was waiting on an email, because she didn't get the email, because she made a phone call and no one called her back, because, you know, and so it was always projecting her irresponsibility onto someone else. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen sometimes where, you know, things don't fall through the cracks or whatever. I'm talking about a way of life, a way of being, of, you know, if somebody says, you're crazy, then you become the one that's crazy. And so they project it back onto you. And why do narcissists do this? They do this because they have a very fragile sense of self, and they really cannot. It's a survival mentality. They cannot take responsibility for anything that's going to make them look bad in any way. That's why they don't say sorry. Anything that's going to take away from that fragile sense of self, in their mind, it just, they're now exposed, it shatters, and that's it. You know, now the world knows how worthless they feel inside. And, you know, I do view narcissism as a continuum. Basically, you know, all of us want to feel seen, heard, and know that we matter, right? That's part of being a human being. And all people, you know, do things that, you know, want to, you know, allow them to feel more valuable. I mean, even if you're the most altruistic person in the world and all you're doing is helping the poor or homeless or whatever, you're doing it so that you can feel good, so that you know that your life matters. If you tell people about your accomplishments or things like that, none of that makes you a narcissist, okay? What makes you a narcissist is as you go toward the end of the continuum, and now all you care about is yourself, and you have no idea about anybody else's feelings, nor do you care. Now you're at the end of the continuum, and now it's sort of a pathological issue where, you know, you are a narcissist. And if you are a narcissist, that means that you have no sense of self. It means that somewhere along the way you were injured in some way, traumatized in some way, hurt in some way, and you came to this conclusion as a child that the world is not a safe place, that it's a me or you world. And if it's got to be one of us, it's got to be me. And so I'm not going to give anything to you. And so what happens when they get accused of things is they can't hold that on themselves, so they've got to push it away. And they're going to push it away and push it onto you or whoever is around them, whoever they can to push it onto. And sometimes when they're projecting, they actually even lie. And if you want to know what happens when you catch a narcissist in a lie, check out my video on what happens when you catch a narcissist in a lie. But projection is one of those things that they do to deflect anything away from themselves. And that's one of the things that happens when they lie as well, which is deflect. And if you've seen this before, you've been the recipient of a narcissist projection, give me a totally in the comments. Okay, so now you're dealing with this projection thing, and what can you do about it? And this especially happens at a time when you're starting to negotiate with them. Maybe the relationship is starting to break down. You're starting to see that the birth of that smear campaign. And by the way, if you want to know how to shut down a narcissist smear campaign, check out my video on shut down a narcissist smear campaign. But anyway, what happens is, as this is happening to you, you start to feel really, really defensive, and your first inclination is to fight back. Your first inclination is to go, that's not me, and what are you saying, and that's you, and you're accusing me of exactly what you are, and fighting back. And what happens at that point is now you're down into it. You're in the mud. There's nowhere for you to go. And you're exactly where they want you to be, by the way. So the first thing I want you to do when a narcissist is projecting on you is just stop. Stop and observe and listen and take a breath and go, I know what's happening here. I mean, you don't have to say that out loud, but you can say that to yourself and go, okay, I see what's happening here. This person is projecting onto me. And if I fight back, and if I go, any further in this, it's not going to end well for me. So let me just stop for a second and take a breath. And that'll give you a moment to get your composure, to get your emotions under control, to see what's happening, and think before you act. So that's number one. The second thing that you can do is keep your emotions in check and not take that bait. You can just go, okay, I see what you're saying, and I understand that that's your position, and I see that you're upset. And if you want to know about more phrases to disarm a narcissist, check out my video on phrases to disarm a narcissist. But in the meantime, you can just take, stock of what's going on, see it, don't get emotionally engaged. I always tell people to just take a look at it as if you're a third-party observer, as if you are a person who's watching what's happening. You don't have any emotion in it. And so when you take yourself out of that, then they don't have anything to project onto. It's just not sticking. It's sort of like, just imagine it's sort of like coming up against you, but you're like Teflon. It just falls to the floor and goes away. Okay, so that's the second thing. And the third thing is, for sure, do not fight back. Don't take the bait. Because if you do that, you're not going to get anywhere. And you're really, really going to end up making things worse for yourself. You're going to end up being upset. Let me just tell you this. You are not going to convince that narcissist that you are right. It ain't going to happen. So there's no good coming out of this. They're not going to turn around and go, oh, I see your point. You're right. I'm so sorry. I was the one who did that to you. This whole being aware of self and being full enough and whole enough and complete enough to be able to come forward and take responsibility, that's not going to happen in that moment. I mean, some narcissists, I suppose, do go and get help. 99.9% of them probably don't. And so don't expect that that's going to happen in this particular situation either.